Tonight, we are very fortunate to have three excellent speakers who will deal with topical issues which will apply to all our farms over the next number of weeks and months. Just a reminder before we start, you have a Q&A function on your screen, and if you would like to ask a question, just please use the Q&A feature on your screen as you wish. If you type the question in there, I will put it to either Martin or William on your behalf as we go on. So look, without any further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker tonight, who is Martin Kavanagh. Martin Kavanagh is a qualified veterinarian and dairy herd and health consultant. He has worked internationally in a variety of ruminant production systems over the past 20 years. Martin has particular expertise in herd health problem solving, cow nutrition, particularly dry and transition cow management, calf health and infectious disease management. Martin has recently taken on a new role with Munster Bovine. Martin has presented at Drinagh events previously and given the positive feedback from those we warmly welcome back again tonight. So look, Martin, I suppose I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Donald, very much, and thanks for the kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully we can get the technology to work okay for us. So I might get people to give me an indication. Are we able to see our head slide?
Martin,
yeah, everybody's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, I have taken on a new role at Munster. I've operated as an independent consultant, and some of you there may be aware I would have worked with the herd health part of Munster since 2009. So I've taken on a role recently with Doreen, working business development and sustainability side, which will involve a certain amount of liaison with co-ops. But tonight, because Drinagh asked me, we're gonna chat a little bit about managing transition cows. And you are heading into your calving season. I'm sure some of you have some early calves on the ground as is. So this is hopefully going to be a bit of a practical run through. So tiny bit of science at the start to get us going, and then we're going to really look at the solutions bit. And I appreciate any questions, any issues, anything that's arising out of this. It'll certainly help the discussion, because I can appreciate just being lectured at with a webinar. Sometimes it can be difficult to pick up the right messages. So your questions are really, really valuable. Okay, so I mean, I think the first point for me always is breeding really starts in our transition period. If we don't get our dry cows right, and if we end up with issues around transition, we're going to have issues in that first service conception rate. We're not going to get good quality eggs hitting us in that period. Remember that those eggs are getting formed way before you're starting to see heats. And the quality of embryo is going to be important to us. So while we see these obvious signs of transition, the milk fevers that are down, you have to treat the health cleanings, the dirty cows, all of these things, we have to remember that these are the obvious signals, but they're often a signal that there's more going on there. So if I'm getting quite a high percentage of these happening on farm, there is an indication that more cows are going to get affected. So one cow down with milk fever probably equals about 6 cows that have got subclinical milk fever. They're a bit wobbly, but you don't really notice, and their feed intake might be back. So what we do right now, or what we should have done since probably the 1st of December, is going to be key to fertility in the breeding season. We'll see if we can advance this along. Okay, right. Don't get too knocked out by graphs. I hate looking at them myself. I'm just going to try and dig up a pointer here if I can. Laser pointer, right. So in this bottom line, this bottom red line here is going to be our energy balance. And right at this point of 0, this is when our cow calves. So as we follow that axis along, that's the weeks from calving. So our cow is actually falling into poorer energy balance before she calves. The size of the big calf inside her, she's not eating as much, she's not as comfortable. And also her energy demand from that growing calf is quite high. So energy balance is starting to drop. She has her calf, whack, right down it goes. And we get this major dip down for about, that 4 weeks for about a month. And as the cow slowly builds her intake, she starts to come into positive energy balance around that 9-10 week period. So 60 days in, a lot of our cows are in positive energy balance. And this is the point we're actually starting to breed these cows. So once we hit positive energy balance, we can breed away. So the problem on the farms is if we have individual cows or groups of cows where this plunge down goes down too deep and lasts too long, we end up in a situation that we're hitting positive energy balance later in our lactation. And that means it's more difficult to breed. So that's reflected in the blue line is the energy requirements. That's the milk production. Milk production is shooting up, big requirement to produce milk. And the green line is our energy uptake, our feed intake. So that feed intake is not matching how much milk is being produced. And there's no cow in the world that it'll match. They always going to milk a little bit off their back, but it's for how long and how deep that is. So those higher volume cows, those higher genetic volume cows will run into that trouble a lot deeper. Okay, so we just got to remember these things. Get out of this laser pointer again. Apologies now. So we can click on the slide. So negative energy balance before calving, big deep drop here. We got to lessen the drop, and we got to make sure that we hit a positive point for breeding, right? So that's the key thing with energy balance in cows. Just an indicator in numbers. Again, don't worry about what the values are. They're UFL values. It doesn't matter. The point here is that a 650 kilo cow before she calves needs about 8.5 units of energy. She's typically eating nearly 10 from straightforward, reasonable silage. So she's actually probably overeating a little bit, a lot of our cows. Right after calving, they need about 16.5, and they're eating about 12. So eating too much, eating too little is our main problem. And often our cows, particularly in good silages, can gain quite a lot per day unless we're really, really watching their body condition. So the tendency of a dry cow, they're lazy, they're doing nothing, they're pigs, they're lying down and they're eating. And if we get a lot of feed in there, we can actually run some of these cows to weight. And that can be a significant problem. Now, not for everybody, but for groups of cows, and we'll get to that. So how much are our cows eating, and do we know, do we measure it? None of us do. I mean, let's be pragmatic here. We don't. We put out silage and we're often hopeful. People with mixer wagons probably in a situation that they are getting into a bit more measurement and a bit more control. Doesn't mean everyone has to have one, but we do need to have some rationale behind how much silage we feed cows. So generally, we're looking at about 11 to 12 kilos of dry matter in these close-up groups of dry cows. If we feed them more than their requirement, we're going to start running into trouble with cows putting on too much weight, and particularly individuals. Okay, so what's the risk? Pre-calving negative energy protein balance, NEPB, so negative energy balance, poor mineral balance pre-calving if we're not good about it, not adapting the rumen properly. We lose energy after calving, mineral balance not good after calving. We don't look after the rumen health. There's overfeeding concentrate in the early lactation. So they go from 0 to hero overnight in terms of concentrate feed. We run into trouble. And we get what we call, lovely American term, catabolic Armageddon, right, in individual cows. So this is obviously the real extreme. And right in here, you see this orange liver. So this liver is full of fat. And what will happen is they'll mobilize so much body fat off themselves and they'll dump it in the liver because they're not able to cope with it. So our cow with ketosis is like an engine with a bad exhaust, not able to cope with the amount of fat being broken down. So it emits a certain amount of exhaust called ketones that basically are toxins within the blood and depress appetite and cause that disease ketosis that you see. Or they dump all this fat into the liver at the same time, and the liver just doesn't function well. And your vet will treat some of these cows for mastitis, metritis, all those usual things you see, and they don't respond. And you're bloody annoyed paying a vet bill. But some of these cows have severe fatty liver and their immune system is shot. They will never get better. They will never get better. So if you're getting into these severe ill cows, cows off form turning into very ill cows after calving, we're really getting into the severe negative energy balance scenario, and vets get bet with this, okay? How do we measure this type of performance on your farm? Generally on a spring farm, it all happens all of a bang. You guys run in, you're starting to calve, and all of a sudden you get a rake of milk fevers. So looking at targets and stuff is probably not sensible for spring. You've got to deal with it as it arises. But if we look back to your previous year, if you're hitting over about 5% milk fevers, you have a problem. Okay, and we can look in milk recordings. We can actually look at things like the fat protein ratios and the protein. That's what we do on milk recordings, and we can actually tell whether you're at risk or there's some risk of negative energy balance going on. The big one is dropping body condition after calving. If we're seeing greater than 20% of the cows losing more than half a score in any breed or any type, that's a problem for us within that first 6 weeks. I expect you to have under 5% retained cleanings. You'll always get some. DAs in Ireland under 2%, 5% in continental groups. We look under 2% left display stomachs. Fertility, you'll see impacts. So if you're having a low first service conception rate, I will go back and look at what happened cows in February and March. February and March, right? Okay, body score. I'm not going to get into this. These are 2 Chinese cows that I met out in China. This is typical body condition for some beef cows in China. Our beef industry is not at risk, I think. What's the problems with BCS? We all think we know it, right? It's a bit of a religion, but it's not practice. So lots of people preach it, but nobody does it, or very few. We all recognize thin and fat cows, and often that's enough for me, as long as you're recognizing them. You got to understand the risk in your system. Are you prone to fat cows? Are you losing weight? And the problem is it can be quite subjective. And some people will get this wrong. Some people will get it wrong. Not doing it on time. So people say we'll do it 4 times a year. That's useless to me. The key point for you guys with BCS, particularly in seasonal herds, is from the end of November right into kind of April, I really need to be looking at BCS probably 3 weekly to see the level of drop and change, and then react to it so I can do something about it. It's retrospective. By the time you see BCS dropping, cows have probably been in trouble for 2 weeks. Always remember that. Really useful if you look at the trend. And in my dry cows and herds that are at risk, we'll walk through those cows every 2 weeks and pick out the thins and fats and change them around or change groups. So you can't just let them sit there for 6 weeks, feed them silage, close the door, hope for the best. Not a good idea. Not with the type of cow we have today. Because genetics, the cows are improving no end. The level of milk production is increasing on the majority of farms. So the level of metabolic stress is creeping in. And even though we're well protected by fertility sub-index to whole condition on cows, watch those milk kilos coming into our cows. Just watch it. Watch out your carryovers. There's no place for a carryover in a spring herd. I'm sure I'll get shot for saying that, but really, they're bad cows for a reason. We don't want them coming through again. And again, overfeeding the dry cow. Once-a-day systems, we've seen this a problem with milk fever and some of the once-a-day herds, where they're just running into too much weight and late lactation and they can't control it in the dry period and they kick off a good bit of milk fever. Relatively common problem. Once a day is a specialist job. You really need to know what you're doing and you really need to know how to control body condition in once a day systems. Okay, very simple rule. If I see a V shape, I'm equal to 3 or less, right? If you see that V shape on the cows, if I see a U shape, I'm over 3. It's nothing fancy, but the point of view, a bunch of cows can walk past you very fast and you can get a very good handle on what sort of percentage of cows need to be looked at. And over fat is as bad as too thin. Always remember that. So look, take your Teagasc advisor's advice, your vet's advice, whatever consultant you're using is good at body scoring. It's a good idea to learn it. Don't worry too much about the numbers, but understand the risk and do it frequently enough. Okay. Lots of science that tells us excess body condition score at calving. This is American research. Feeding high energy diets in a couple of weeks before calving, we get reduced energy intake. In other words, it stops them eating. So steaming up cows stops them eating after calving. Be careful. Some of John Roach's work in New Zealand, cows in excess of body score 3 are at high risk of negative energy balance after calving. And they're at high risk of milk fever. So it's very clear messaging. Fat cows are not good for our system. And so it'll vary with you guys from year to year. You'll get 4 years perfect and get 1 year bad just because the silage has changed or circumstances has changed. So what happened last year mightn't necessarily apply for this year. Just some slide adapted from Teagasc. I'm not going to go into detail here. And it's very simple, it's straightforward. If I'm in good body condition and I've got a 12-week dry period, I need to control my energy intake on 68 DMD silage. If I have an 8-week dry period, I may need half a kilo concentrate. And a 4-unit difference in DMD, I need to up and down my meal by about half kilos. This information is available on any of the Teagasc information. And I think it's a good starting point. When I say control energy, that could be restricting silage intake, restricting a group, maybe using a diet wagon, feeding straw, whatever. Okay, just this is purely out of interest. There is hundreds of companies out there making a bloody fortune out of transition cows, selling heaps of stuff. All of it has a use, but don't get too married to it. We have an awful lot of treatments, but we really need to look at what's driving it if we're having transition problems in herds. So I'm reluctant to immediately hand you a treatment. Okay, basic rules for avoiding transition problems. So if I want to get away from things, displaced abomasums are a real signal. They're a signal of poor feed intake, and they're a real strong indicator of subclinical ketosis knocking around inside your herd. Held cleanings and dirty cows, cows not eating enough form, poor startups, and milk fever, of course. Understand your genetics. Some of you will have no problem because your genetics are metabolically bomb-proof. So cows able to hold condition, not massive milk demand, can work well within your system. Some of you are starting to breed cows that are too milky for your systems, and you're going to get bust. Some of you are breeding in quite a bit of Jersey cross, which is fine, but they have a tendency and they're prone to milk fever. And I never want to hang condition on a Jersey if I can avoid it. No fat cows, please. We really need to sort out the feed space issue. It's really critical. We've expanded our herds 20, 30% in a lot of cases. We have not accommodated feed space. A lot of the building that was done in the 90s crippled feed space in sheds because they built the cubicles perpendicular to the feed barriers. Huge problem. And it'll sort out lots of things if you create feed space. Feed management itself, getting good gut fill after calving. We'll talk about fresh cows a bit later. Calcium intakes. We might have to feed a bit of protein before calving if our silage is really poor. Not always, but silage is down around 10 protein. So a little bit of protein feeding can help that last couple of weeks. Cows with twins, if you identify them, they need help. And decent minerals. You can use energy precursors, but I will only use these if we've got a significant problem that we haven't managed. Okay. Feed management issues, what do we come across? Those of you with diet wagons, this is a diet out of a diet wagon. This is the same diet out of the diet wagon, just mixed differently. You two different feed intakes. So the lower one they'll eat more of, and the other one that they'll sort out and you get thin cow, fat cow. If you're going to use a diet wagon, try and use it properly. Okay. Feed fresh every day. I see a lot of rotten material fed to cows. If silage is getting wet, we need to adjust, or getting very dry, we need to adjust. Big problem this year, in my experience, it's anecdotal, but I've found quite a few pits with mycotoxin. We've had trouble with things like cows failing antibiotic test in the bulk tank going in because they've been taken in penicillin molds. We've seen trouble with cows running into real significant digestive trouble as fresh cows, and also some abortions and bits and pieces. If something odd is happening, will you think mycotoxin? Not enough feed space, no fresh groups. Okay, all these things are very, very significant. So there's loads of stuff we can manage without having to put in significant volumes of medication. Okay. How do cows eat? Please remember that cows eat in groups. They're what we call allelomimetic. They like to eat with their buddies because they're herd animals and they're prey animals, right? They follow rituals of behavior. So a short feed space with a pile of feed in front of it for a lot of cows is actually of no benefit to you, because you'll have a group of cows who will never feed correctly at that, or they will not compete. So piling feed does not compensate for low feed space. They're crepuscular, they feed at dawn and dusk, so you need fresh feed out at the right times. And they're incredibly competitive.
It's not under the concrete,
isn't it?
Okay. I can hear you, Donald, there in the background. Do a bit of muting. Just in case you're going to sound bad about what I was saying. They're competitive, so dominance, 7 days to readjust to a pecking order. So if cows are mixed groups, it takes them a while to sort out. So just be aware, it's not as simple as. Okay, Cows just before and just after calving need a feed space per cow. That's my rule. I'm not going to waver from it. I'm not going to budge for anyone until someone shows me science something is better. 7 cows would fit in a bay unless they're Jersey crosses. You might squeeze in the 8th. In a 2-row system, and I'll show you what that is in a minute, stocked at 100%, you get a cow per feed space. In a 3-row system, like most of us have, there's 1.5 cows per feed space, which is fine when they're dry, but not when they're close to calving and when they're fresh, right? And of course, everyone overstocks the bloody shed, so you make it worse. You get thin cow, fat cow, and you get bullying in there. And certainly, if I get poor startups, increased displaced stomachs, increased ketosis, I'm looking at feed space. Here's a beautiful shed. This is a 2-row shed. So a long barrier and 2 rows of cubicles feeding off that barrier. 2 rows of cubicles here feeding off this barrier. So it's a 2-row system. 2-row systems allow a feed space per cow. If I was ever going to build a cow shed in the future, all the time, all day long, every day, build 2 rows. And they're as economic because we can leave them open. We can make them narrower. You are not busting yourself for concrete here if you do it right. So it's not an argument. The benefit for the cow is, A, you can buffer feed grazing cows properly. And also the second thing is your dry cow transition will work a lot better. Straight on to milk fever. These are figures from Norbrook, guys. Calciject sales. In 2018, they sold roughly 132,000 bottles of Calciject. 2020, they sold 176. So the usage has crept up, and I know the cow numbers have crept up. But if we just take it, just say we use 1.5 bottles to treat a cow, and I know it's often a lot more than that. But at 1.5 bottles on average, with the Calciject being thrown out there in 2020, probably 8% of the dairy cows in the country are getting some sort of treatment for calcium deficiency. So, look, individual farms have more problems than others. I've had farms where I've had 60, 70% of the cows get milk fever. I've had farms with none. So it is individualized to farms, but I would absolutely, no question, there's an increase in the level of milk fever we're getting. Why? These questions are, how many of these can we answer yes to? Don't know about increased number of crossbred cows, I'm not sure. Higher yielding cows, yep, definitely. Seen more of them. Lack of space, underfeeding milking cows, overfeeding dry ones. Variable mineral contents of silages and energies in there as well. Inconsistent feeding and so on. And also I think we don't really talk about it enough. I think commercial companies talk about it and everyone feels they're selling them something. But as a national team, we don't talk a lot about the transition cow. We assume they do okay. And I don't think that is correct. I don't think it's correct. And certainly our vets would not be as busy as they are if all this calving was happening magically without a problem. No question. Okay, there was a question, I think, and I think Tim might have it later on, the importance of silage testing. This is just a mineral sample. Very, very typical. Yeah, and we got to take these, take them a little bit carefully. But that's a low potash, relatively high calcium, low phos, low magnesium silage. Almost standard across the board of Irish silages. But there's a lot more potash knocking around now because it's already been spread at growing times. So potash and high calcium, low magnesium, and low phos tips us into milk fevers. So a lot of the time, that potash is a significant problem for us. And if I don't know it's in your pit, I can't predict anything. Yeah, so you've really got to do a little bit of mineral sampling, talk to the guys about it. What's happening? Classic down cow, we are all familiar with them. Deficiency in calcium, but also don't forget our friend phos. If you're pumping in bottles of calcium into these guys and they're not getting up, there's more going on there. Crawler cows that aren't injured, they're creeping around the place and eating a bit, often they're phosphorus deficient and they need oral phosphorus to get them up, oral phosphorus. Any cow that's off its food will be low in phos. They got to take it in their diet constantly. So what happens when we treat these cows? We throw in a Calciject, and what will it do? Okay, so straight away, see that red line? If I put in an IV calcium into a cow or a subcut calcium in, it'll shoot up her calcium level. Absolutely pile it up. That's why they'll hop up in 10, 15 minutes. But it'll collapse as fast. It'll come pouring down. And within about 8 hours, even about 6 hours, we're getting back to square one. If you ram in another bottle, up it'll go again and come down. So we need to be a little careful here, because every time you push it up that high, you stop her own mechanisms from getting the calcium out of the bone. So ramming in repeated bottles doesn't necessarily always help. What really helps is if you give them oral calcium around the same time. If they get a bolus or they get it through their diet, they hold their calcium level steady. Sorry, apologies. They hold their calcium level steady for a much longer period. Hence, the boluses do have great value. Calciject, sudden sharp shock, don't depend on it. And then the bolus. And also, if you're trying to prevent a cow, if your cow's a bit wobbly and she can still swallow, the bolus will probably do more for her. Okay, if they're not getting up, really think about, is there ketosis going on? Have they got pain? Pain relief is really important for down cows. Talk to your vet about having pain relief on standby. Do not give them a shot of penicillin. Give them a shot of pain relief. Pain relief, pain relief. They're often 580, 600 kilos, and they're lying on a hard surface, and they're buggered, and they've hurt themselves. Give them a chance. Okay, oral FOS if I need it. Not getting up, I'll get oral FOS into her. Again, take your vet's advice. That cow's not getting up in a 12-hour period, get the vet to have a look. Preventing. No fat cows, please. High magnesium before calving. High magnesium before calving. So you, high levels of magnesium in your dry cow mineral, possibility of adding extra magnesium prior to calving in the form of sweetened CalMag or your magnesium flakes. Try and make low K forages. If you're having a lot of problem, particularly with your crossbreds, you certainly need to look at that. So a specific dry cow silage, specific milker silage. This is a huge issue, is that we have one big, massive bloody pit of silage full of everything. And even as you're going through it, it'll change and you'll create more problems. So realistically in our herds, we need dry silage, dry cow silage, and we need milker silage. The dry cow silage, bulky, fibrous, low in potash if we can. The milker silage, high energy, high DMD, etc. There's other fancy things you can do. There's zeolites and there's partial decads and so on. I generally don't have to go there. I can sort out a lot by just getting some extra magnesium in there and good feed space. Standard mineral, the lads and your advisors know plenty about this, what's available to you. Two key things for me in a mineral I'll always look for first are going to be how much magnesium is in there. I look for about 25%, and I look for a lot of vitamin E. They're the two things I would really look for inside the minerals. We can argue the toss after that. Just be aware, cows do not like to be moved around when they're due to calve. They do not like to be moved around when they're due to calve. Unpredictable and competitive social environments before calving causes lots of problems, and we see more uterine infections. And often when we get that stillbirth blip with heifers at the beginning of calving, often it's a result of movement, stress, meeting a new group, etc., etc. So, and we say, often we say, it's low iodine and so on. If we're getting a low iodine environment, it's generally because their feed intake has dropped. Okay, so they need iodine every day. So if I'm getting iodine symptoms, it generally means feed intake has dropped. No feed space, switching group, stress, drop the feed intake, and you may compensate then by adding iodine into water and so on. But a lot of the time, it's actually a social pressure issue. If we look how cows move, there's a close-up pen over here, a maternity pen, and a fresh pen. This is all very fancy. I'm not saying it happens. A lot of the time, your cows are calving so fast, you don't have this opportunity. But say, for instance, I calve 2 cows. They go into the fresh area. Brilliant. And then, of course, I found a space then in my maternity area. I bring in a cow. She's got to meet a whole new bunch and settle down. And sometimes cow mightn't calve, so she goes back again. Every single movement has probably knocked out some kilos of dry matter intake out of that cow. What I prefer to do is calve out as many cows as I can out of the group, then refill the group completely with a new group. They settle better because they're with their buddies. And if we're dealing with large herds, we'll always try and calve them in large pens, open pens. We will not use single pens. The reason being, cows get really distressed when they're isolated from the group that they're used to. And as you found yourself, you put them in a single pen for a night and they spend the night walking it. Okay, single pen only when the blisters out and feet are coming. Okay, last thing is really make a fresh pen. So your cows after calving need to go to an area where they have really good silage. I add extra calcium onto it for that couple of days. Post-calver mineral. Okay, so these, I call them colostrum cows. They might be under the withdrawal. They're into a comfortable area, 1 feed space per cow, extra calcium, best silage. Step up my feed from there. Start off my 2-3 kilos, 2 kilos, and then actually a kilo per over 3 days. Now that often isn't practical, but just take it easy. Take it easy. Do not be whacking them in 6-7 kilos. Feed yield systems, be careful. I see a lot of guys putting them on feed yield way too early, 10 days, 15 days. Cow hasn't settled, her yield hasn't settled. And if her yield falls, you're actually cutting down her feed. There's some additives you can use, I'm sure. Often all these cows only here a couple of days. The length of the withdrawal, length of colostrum. But what I'll get here is gut fill, and they can hit outside then no problem. High comfort, low stocking rate. If I can do 9 cows to 10 cubicles, it'll work better. I know you guys are strapped for space, but think about it. These are a crucial bunch. Feed space, 2-row system if I can, plenty of water. Make sure they always have fresh feed, always have feed being refused. We want to push them into about 13 kilos of dry matter in week 1. You'll avoid a lot of hassle if you do this. You'll avoid a lot of hassle if you do this. What signals you're looking for? How are the at-risk cows? Look at their coats, rumination and activity, and check their manure. I do like the collars. I'm not selling them. I'm not advertising them for anybody. They're nice, and big herds low in labor, even look small herds low in labor. They will pick up cows that have poor rumination, and it's the strongest signal of health in cows. Have cows poor rumen fill a couple of hours after being fed, poor gut fill, or more than 10% too thin, too fat. These are all fresh cow signals. Okay, and as well, obviously, cows with metritis and dirt. Few treatments. These cows need fluids. I see a lot of you guys are buying pumps. Yeah, I have no problem with that. If you get a bit of training how to use them properly, most of you will kill a cow with them. Watch, some pumps for sale are too narrow. The bore of the tube is quite narrow. You're going to shove it into a couple of cows' lungs. I see them being sold out of people's vans. They're not great. Just be a little careful, be wary. If you want to buy a pump, will you chat with your vet? We'll generally use much wider bore pumps, okay? You can buy lots of powders and boluses and liquids. They're all quite useful. They're all energy sources. Just don't ever use glucose or dextrose in a pump. There's no point. It's no good for a cow unless it actually goes IV. So they can't use straight sugar. They got to use propylene glycol or propionate. So these mixed up packages is what you're looking for. If they have a temperature, you may need to give them some sort of antibiotic. We'll discuss that with your vet. Don't be jumping in with the Marbicils and stuff like that straight off. Do not do this. Simple penicillins, give us a chance here on the AMR side. Really important for you to deal with pain relief. Pain relief, pain relief. Once a day milking will help you. No question. Okay, we're at the end. Lads, will you pick the right cows? And that's my Munster hat on. Cows fit for purpose for your system. Are you high yield or are you low yield? Where are you? If you have the wrong cows in your system, you're in trouble. Fat cows are as problematic as cows that are thin in the dry period. Feed space is king. If you take one thing from this, feed space is king. Milk fever can be prevented, and herds that I've dealt with, I've been lucky enough to deal with, we can pretty much eliminate it, get it down below 5%, no problem. Fresh group is my friend, always is. Pain relief is your friend. Talk to your vet about using pain relief in cows after calving. It's amazing how you'll up their dry matter intake when they feel comfortable. Do not give a cow after a hard pull a bottle of penicillin. Give her a couple of days of pain relief. What happens to fresh cows will dictate the first service conception rate. Do not underestimate it. If you have trouble with first service conception rate, you need to look back at what happened January, February, March. The Munster blurb. I'm going to leave it very simple. The reason why I'm getting involved with that is I want to breed the right cows and I want to breed them right. As simple as that for your system, for every system. High genetic merit replacements, we're looking at high value calves. We want to have high 6-week calving rates due to high conception rate bulls and a low empty rate. That's a goal. So we need to think about what we're doing there. Guys, thanks very much. That's a very quick run. Hopefully I didn't kill you on time, and we can work away questions, I think, after the next presentation. So thanks for that, Donald.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much for that. You gave us plenty of food for thought there in a critical time, probably in the cow's lactation. Just for any of you who might have joined late, there's a Q&A function on your screen there. So anybody who wants to add a question or put a question to Martin or William can do so. And we will do it after the second speaker has spoken tonight. That's what we propose to do. We actually propose that we let our next speaker, William Burchill, speak now, and we will do a questions and answer session with Martin and William after that. So now I'd like to introduce William Burchill. William is a native of Bovine, so he knows Drinagh very well. Having completed his doctorate in 2014 in Moorpark, William worked in research in Johnstown, Castle and Wexford for 3 years and returned to Cork in 2017 and has been working at a dairy advisor ever since, servicing 20 discussion groups in the mid to East Cork area. William's key areas of interest are in nutrient management around the efficient use of slurry and fertilizer, as well as grass and clover grazing systems. With the main slurry and fertilizer season starting in the next few weeks, we look forward to William's presentation on slurry management strategies. So, William, at this stage, we'll let you take over.
Thanks very much, Donald, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you this evening, as Donald is outlining, just a bit about upcoming fertilizer and slurry for the springtime, okay? So look, I suppose obviously we all know the challenges that are there regarding kind of fertilizer price now at the moment. So look, we'll talk through a few bits about maybe how we can try to maybe cut down fertilizer costs this year, how we can use fertilizer efficiently in the springtime, and also maybe get the best use of slurry that's on the farm as well. You know, the biggest probably available nutrient source that we have on the farm currently, okay? So look, just by a bit of way of introduction, and I suppose if we're going to be talking about fertilizer and slurry, like the first thing we need to kind of realize and to look at is like, what is the value of different feeds within our system, okay? So if we're going to be looking at strategies to put out fertilizer or slurry to grow spring grass, we need to look at what is the value of that feed relative to other feeds, okay? So again, like this is very back to basic, lads. You'll obviously know this already, okay? But it's important that we start here, okay? So if we just look at spring grass and we look at the energy value of spring grass, it's kind of called there 1 UFL. And look, it's just a way of ranking, you know, the energy within different feeds. Two most important parts of feed is your energy value and also your protein value as well, okay? So spring grass is giving us good energy, very good protein as well, okay? You know, if we compare that to good quality silage, you know, we'll have a less energy than spring grass and we'll have a lot less protein as well, okay? And then if we compare that to 16% crude protein ration, okay, you know, spring grass will have a little bit less energy than ration per kilogram, and also what you call it, but at the same time, it will have a bit more protein than your standard 16% crude protein loss, okay? So like, you know, there is a lot of talk and there's a lot of kind of, you know, people worried and thinking about fertilizer costing an awful lot, but we also have to just be conscious that, you know, the cost of ration has gone up as well, as you're well aware, and you know, as a result, then the value of spring grass has gone up as well. So we must consider that when we're making decisions regarding fertilizer this springtime, okay? So if we look at it like, and then, you know, one thing is the value of grass, but how much is it going to cost us to grow it? Now, what's the typical response that we get to fertilizer in springtime? You know, and is it justified? And does it stack up, you know, to spread it? Like, how much is the cost to put on? And what value of grass are we going to get from that early nitrogen, okay? So if we just look at it, okay, and we just take an example. So see if we've got can there costing 675 euros a ton, you know, and if we break that down and look at then, you know, that's probably costing us around €2.50 per kilogram of in when can is at 675 per ton, okay? So, you know, again, you know, for the start of the year, a lot of us will go out with our kind of standard half bag of urea, or kind of 23 units of nitrogen per acre, which is essentially 30 kilos of in per hectare, okay, in the new metric, in the new farm. So what you call it, that's coming in at around costing around 30 euros an acre to do that, or 75 euros a hectare, okay? So that's how much it's going to cost us to put that on. You know, if we're talking about the early nitrogen, we might be talking kind of, you know, kind of from now on, you know, up to, you know, into the first couple of weeks of February, you know. So then, like, what typical kind of response would you expect? Like, how much grass are you going to, that nitrogen, early nitrogen going to grow for you? Look, they've done a lot of work on this. They've done trials on different sites across the country, different years, or they've had different weather conditions. And look, and typically what they're finding is that when you put on that fertilizer in late January, early February, you'll typically get, for every kilogram of nitrogen you put on, you'll get about 10 kilos of grass, dry matter grown, or kind of a 1:10 response, okay? So if we look at our typical application there in the spring, we put on our half bag urea, which is our 30 kilograms per hectare. That'll give you, put that on, it'll give you 300 kilos of grass dry matter. And how much of that value, like, you know, is that worthwhile putting on, okay? So if we look at it, like, you know, from a lot of work that's been done, you know, last spring, 2021, we would have been valuing spring grass at around 16 cents a kilo, okay? So if it's valued at 16 cents a kilo and we grow 300 kilos of it, that's worth about 48 euros a hectare, okay? So that hasn't broken even, okay, based on grass being valued at 16 cents a kilo for last year. But to be honest with you, lads, when you look at the way the price of rations have gone, you know, spring grass, you know, relative to ration is probably valued at around 25 cents a kilo. So if you compare the energy content in spring grass and the good protein it's got, you know, if you put a value on that relative to ration, spring grass will be worth around 25 cents a kilo. If you're getting 300 kilos grown from your 1:10 response, that's worth about 75 euros a hectare of grass. So in short, you know, putting on that half bag urea in that late January, early February period will just about break even if you're getting kind of an average response to that fertilizer, okay? And look, there'll be cases on everyone's farm, and you all know the different parts of your farm where, you know, you'll have reseeded ground, you'll have ground, say, that was, you know, has good P and K indexes, the lime has been looked after in the last number of years, and like you'll probably get higher responses than that. But then you'll have parts of the farm, it might be the colder ground, some wetter ground, the north facing ground, the ground that hasn't been reseeded maybe in a good few years, and the response might actually be lower than that. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, in every single individual farm, there'll be parts of the farm that will get that 1:10 response and more, which will justify that early nitrogen going on, okay? But then there'll be parts of the farm, you know, that won't, okay? And everyone here on the call this evening know their products on their farm that grows the grass, and that will give them that response, okay? So, okay, the cost of fertilizer has gone up, but the relative value of grass has also gone up, like, so it still justifies putting on fertilizer, you know, on the parts of the farm that will get a good response from it, okay? So, like, That's the early part into January, February period. Typically, as we get into March, the responses typically go from, for every kilogram of nitrogen you put on, you're probably getting close to 15 kilos of grass. So if we do the same sum on that again, so you put out 30 kilos, it costs you 75 euros a hectare, and in March you're probably getting back 112 euros per hectare worth of grass. Okay, so again, as the spring goes on, and like this is based on average years, you will have good Marches and you'll have poor Marches, and the same with the months of February as well. But on the law of averages, as we go on later into the springtime, as soil temperatures are warming up, there will be better responses then. Okay, so it's very much still justified, but I think you really have to pick the parts of the farm where you spread that early nitrogen. Once you get into March, then the responses are stronger as soil temperatures are climbing, and as day length is getting longer as well, they're getting longer days, longer evenings as well. Okay, so that's the fertilizer side of it. I suppose the other thing that we need to look at then, so fertilizer is one important thing we need to make decisions on. The other then is slurry. And I suppose again, just to start off by way of a background to it, like what is the actual value of slurry? What's actually in 1,000 gallons of it? So look, there's a lot of work done on this down through the years there, where they've looked at and tested slurry within Teagasc. And typically what they're finding on average is that 1,000 gallons of slurry will give you about 9 units of nitrogen in 1,000 gallons, okay? 5 units of P and 32 units of K or potash, okay? And like, to put a value on that this year, that's worth about 40 euros per 1,000 gallons of slurry now at the moment, cattle slurry. So like, to be honest with you, 12 months ago, that figure was 20 euros. But with the actual increase in fertilizer prices, the value of your slurry has actually increased then too as well, okay? So that's kind of a typical cattle slurry. Look, a lot of it there, he'll have soiled water from the collecting yard. That'll on average will give you about 4 units of nitrogen, 0.7 of units of P, and 5 units of K. So that can be again another important source of nutrients there during the middle of the summer. That's going out there. That's going out 3,000 gallons to the acre, give you about 12 units of nitrogen. A nice bit of P and K in it as well. And look, you might say that soiled water is it's pure water, like there's nothing in it. But the fact that it's so watery is still giving you a nice bit of nitrogen, like, about 4 units. And the reason for that is the more watery the slurry, the more efficiently the nitrogen will be used. And look, it just comes down to standard, practical thinking. When slurry is watery, the nitrogen in the slurry gets washed into the soil faster. Whereas if you have thicker, heavier slurry, it sticks to the top of the ground. There's wind and sun and drying conditions, it can evaporate off the nitrogen. Whereas with the more watery slurry, there might be less nitrogen in it because it's dilute, but the nitrogen is used more effectively. You're typically getting maybe 80% efficiency, whereas with thicker standard slurry from a slatted unit might be 40% efficiency because it's just that bit thicker. It's a bit slower to work its way into the ground, okay? And then again, look, for some of you, pig slurry might be an option. You'll see with pig slurry, it's actually very high in nitrogen, about 19 units in 1,000 gallons of it, 7 units of P and 20 units of K, okay? So again, it's a very good, valuable manure. Some people might be close to piggeries and they're bringing it in. It's good to have those figures on the top of your heads, okay? So that's the value of it. And another thing that we have to be conscious of, there's a lot of people, like I'm talking to my own discussion groups, and they're saying that, they're going to try and use a lot of slurry now this year to try and reduce down the cost of, bagged nitrogen or chemical nitrogen. But one thing we can't lose sight of this year, lads, we can't move away from the basics. And the basics is that 75% of the value of your slurry is in its P and K, okay? So, if we want to make the best use of slurry this coming year, our decisions that we make on farm with our slurry would first of all have to be based around where will we get the best value from the P and K in our slurry, okay? And that we'll come into that now in the next couple of slides, okay? So like, again, you know, I gave you the standard value of what a standard slurry would generally be within Teagasc, you know, and what Teagasc have measured over the last number of years. You know, we said 9 units per 1,000 gallons. It is spread with a dribble bar or trading shoe in the springtime. 5 units of P and 32 units of K, okay? So that's grand, and look, that's a figure that ourselves in Teagasc would trot out at discussion groups and to our clients for the last number of years. But to be honest with you, look, slurry is becoming more and more important, you know, to use it properly, particularly with the high price of chemical fertilizer this year. So look, with that in mind there, last year, a good few discussion groups that I would be working with up around the Teagasc kind of Dairy Gold catchment, they went off and got their slurry tested. So we encouraged it across discussion groups. Look, and in total, we had about 128 samples tested from dairy farms, from anywhere from Macroom to Youghal up to South Limerick, okay? And this is the results that actually came back, okay? So like what we actually found, like these samples here, the standard Teagasc values, they would have been taken back in around the early 2000s, okay? 2002, 2003. And these samples were taken here last winter, slurry samples, okay? So like what we found is, look, the slurry was actually a little bit higher in nitrogen, about 11 units per 1,000 gallons, about the same amount of P and a little bit lower amount of K in it, okay? So that was the average of all the samples. And when the farmers sent in their samples, they also filled out a bit of a survey for us and told us, you know, what tank did the slurry come out of. So some of them had it out of covered tanks, some of them had it out of open towers, some of them had out of open concrete tanks, and some of them took slurry samples out of lagoons, okay? So we were able to break up the results of the slurries in and see how did they vary, the slurry nutrients vary depending on the type of tank it came out of, okay? So you can see, look, on the covered tanks, it had a higher dry matter, it's kind of a thicker slurry, higher nitrogen, P, K contents, okay? And then as the tanks are more open and there's more water going into them, like typically where the lagoons would have the most water going into them, you can see, look, the dry matter of the slurry is dropping down, okay? And with that, then the nutrient contents are dropping down as well, okay? So the nitrogen is dropping down, the P drops down a bit, and the K drops down a bit. But one thing that came out of it is that, look, even within those kind of lagoon type slurries, you know, that can be quite watery, there's still a nice bit of nutrient in them in 1,000 gallons, okay? So, you know, there are things that we need to utilize properly and, you know, make the best value of them now this year, given that, given the current cost of fertilizer, okay? So it was a very interesting exercise. A lot of people in the groups got a lot out of it. You know, they're actually altering the way they apply their slurry now, changing the application rates based on the results. So like, you know, just for yourselves, and if it's something that, you know, you're looking at, something you want to do to try and improve the way you're managing your slurry, you know, this is just a few bits that people can do if they are interested in getting their slurry tested. And in general, look, if you get your slurry tested and your system doesn't change too much, or like the amount of water entering the tank doesn't change, your yard doesn't change that much, the diet of your animals doesn't change that much from winter to winter, you know, the results of one slurry sample, like, you know, could last you for a good number of years. It gives you a good guide as to what's there, like, you know. So like, you know, a typical procedure for taking slurry samples, the most number one priority obviously would be your health and safety, okay? You know, you have to be aware of trips and falls and be aware of like slurry gases as well, okay? So I think that the easiest way to get a slurry sample tested, like, is, you know, you can contact your local lab. There's a number of labs in the country that are getting them tested. You know, take the sample from the slurry, or from the first slurry you spread during the year is what I would say. Like January to March is the best time to do it. You know, agitate up the tank. The tank must be well agitated. What a lot of guys would do is agitate the tank, suck out a load of slurry, in the tanker, drive out from the agitation point, and then open the back hatch into a bucket or into a barrel, and take off like about a litre to half a litre to a litre of slurry and send it off to the lab. Like, you can try and post it to the lab or deliver it to the lab the same day, okay? So look, I was talking to Tim O'Regan there before we came on the call there this evening, and look, Tim was saying that he's going to be organising some of this maybe as well within Drinagh Co-op, that they would be offering free to be able to drop the slurry to the branches, and that they would organise posting off the samples to the labs. So that's a great service. And if we look at that, slurry is valued at about €40 for 1,000 gallons. Like a 2,000 gallon tanker, that value of nutrients would pay for a slurry test. Like, very simple, very effective. Will really give you a good idea of what's in your slurry and give you a better handle on how to manage and how to use it correctly, okay? The other kind of quicker option that's there is the use of a thing called a slurry hydrometer. What it does is it measures the dry matter of the slurry, how thick the slurry is. So you can see the dry matter I'm reading there, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you can use that then to get an estimate of what's in the slurry, okay? Again, some of the suppliers now, not the easiest things to get your hands on. A lot of the time you might have to order them from companies in the UK. There isn't too many people stocking them in Ireland, okay? So I would encourage you to get slurry tested to know what's in it. So then look, if you know what the slurry is in it, and we mentioned that about 75% of the value of the slurry comes from the P and K. So like the first thing you have to do is target slurry to the parts of the farm that need the P and K the most. Okay, this is absolutely vital. Okay, so the places that's going to have the highest demand for P and K is going to be your silage ground. Look, the first cut will take 16 units of P, 100 units of K per acre. Second cut will take 8 units of P, 60 units of K. Okay, so look, if there's even 3 cuts of silage coming off some ground there, could be in excess of 200 units of K required. Okay. Also as well, like ground that's get your soil tests taken. If you don't have recent soil tests, it really does need to be taken. Okay. Then at least you can identify the paddocks that might be low in P and K. And again, I've been trying to target slurry to those particular paddocks. Okay. And in general, what we often find is that the lower index ground, index 1 or 2 for P and K, is generally a silage ground, because there's such a draw from the silage ground. Okay, there's such a huge demand for P and K on the silage ground. Another one just to be aware of as well on the on the grazing platform there, the grazing ground, is that surplus bales, every bale of silage you take off, takes off about 10 units of K. So even if you took off a small bit of bales, 4 bales to the acre, handy crop of silage, with the surplus grass, 4 bales to the acre would take off about 40 units of K, So again, like that ground that there's surplus bales coming off, you do need to try and return slurry to that as well, okay? So that's the P and K, get that right first to maximize the value of that first. Then the next thing to maximize then is the actual slurry nitrogen, okay? So the quickest and the easiest way to do this really is spreading with a trailing shoe or a dribble bar in the springtime, okay? The best way you're going to get nitrogen from your slurry, okay? So like what you typically see with a dribble bar or a trailing shoe is around 9 units per 1,000 gallons in the springtime. If you spread it with the same dribble bar or trailing shoe in the summer, that goes down to 6, purely because in the summertime you're probably having more drier, hotter, sunnier conditions that will evaporate the nitrogen. And if you're using a splash plate, instead of getting 9 from it in springtime, you're probably getting close to 6, okay? And look, even the bigger switch, if you went from using splash plate in the summertime to trailing shoe or dribble bar in the springtime, you're almost tripling the amount of nitrogen in your slurry from 3 units to 9 units, okay? So that's the big way to get the nitrogen out of your slurry, okay? So like in terms of using our slurry as well, I think we need to be we need to be really smart with the way we use our slurry this year and even going forward, just the way things are going regarding, you know, fertilizer costs. And look, then there's the other side of it, which is that kind of environmental side of things that, you know, that we've been hearing a lot about recently, okay? So if we just take, and this is one thing I want people to kind of take away from tonight as well, like if we have a covered tank and we're spreading that slurry of about 2,000 gallons to the acre, that'll give you about 22 units of nitrogen, okay? And if we look at kind of what are the requirements for different nutrients on the farm in different areas and at different times of the year, like that 2,500 gallons of slurry will give you 22 units of nitrogen. So if we're trying to put out the half bag urea there in January, February, you know, that's 2,000 gallons of slurry will do that for you in terms of nitrogen, okay? So anywhere that gets slurry in the springtime, you know, at around 2,000 gallons to the acre of a good a reasonably good slurry, thick slurry from a covered tank, that will be enough, you know, for nitrogen on the grazing ground, okay? You know, and I'm saying 2,000 gallons there now, not 3,000 gallons, okay? You know, 3,000 gallons there would be 33 units. You know, too much nitrogen going on too early. You know, you're way better off to try and, you know, spread out the slurry over a larger proportion of the ground and then be able to cut out that bit of bag fertilizer on a larger proportion of the ground, okay? The other thing then that I'd say as well, look, is that any slurry that's coming kind of from lagoons or open tanks, they'll typically have lower kind of P and K contents, okay? So if you're trying to use that to supply P and K for first cut silage, you'll fall well short of P and K. So if you put out 2,000 gallons from an open tank, give you 8 units of P, 46 units of K, you know, you'll be well short. You'll only have about half the P and K out for your first cut silage requirement, okay? So what's you're way better off to do within your own yards is to look at my covered tanks, the tanks with the you know, less water going into them. You're way better off to go with that type of slurry and target that slurry to your silage ground, okay? And then your more watery stuff here, target this to your grazing ground for that early slurry application to replace fertilizer in early spring, okay? So, you know, if you're putting out 2,000 gallons, that'll give you 16, 14 units. You know, if you put out 3,000 gallons of that kind of more watery slurry, it'll probably give you close to 21 to 25 units, okay? Loads, plenty of nitrogen if it's put out now to last you till about the 1st of March. Like, you know, any ground that gets slurry now, that type of slurry now, should have enough, will give it enough nitrogen to last you to about the 1st of March, and then you can start putting on bag then after that, okay? And as well, look, an application of this slurry here will kind of match in more in terms of, you know, in the day-to-day maintenance of P and K on your grazing ground. You know, when you're milking cows and there's P and K, you know, being consumed by the cows, and that portion of that is going to be going out the gate, the farm gate. You'll be going out the milk lorry, and to kind of replace what's taken off by the cow on grazing ground, you need to put out around 15 to 18 units of P per acre, or 24 to 32 units of K, and that depends on your stocking rate. Look, the higher stock farms will be more milk going out, so there'll be a bit more P and K to be put on for maintenance, whereas it's slightly less on, say, a lower stock farm, when you're kind of under a cow to the acre here, whereas here you'll be kind of stocked at over a cow to the acre, or 2.5 livestock units per hectare, okay? So, you know, this type of slurry here will more match in these kind of maintenance rates of P and K, especially for K. Whereas if you're putting on a lot of thick slurry in your grazing ground, you're putting on an awful lot of K that isn't actually required. Like, you know what I mean? That's on 58 units of K, whereas you actually only require around 24 to 32, okay? So the key message there from that is hold and keep your thicker, better, stronger slurry for the silage ground, and use your more watery slurry then for the grazing ground as a source of nitrogen, for early nitrogen. And it'll also be good to supply a bit of P and K just for maintenance rates on the grazing ground, okay? then, you know, that's kind of the slurry, like, you know, in terms of using that and where to put it. If we try and put this into an overall fertilizer plan then and grazing plan for the springtime, but this is something that I would kind of ask people to think about and maybe to look at as a bit of a plan and to use something like this on their farm might work, okay? So if we're thinking about now, we're coming up to the 1st of March, 1st of February to the 1st of March, we're kind of thinking, what will we do where on the farm here, okay? So again, look, I try and identify the paddocks with the lower grass covers on it and target about 2,500 gallons of slurry to the acre on that ground, okay? That'll supply plenty of nitrogen, will help to drop the tanks before calving, and, you know, it'll be a good bit of nice early nitrogen, okay? Then on paddocks, you know, that you plant to graze, these are usually kind of the paddocks with a medium cover of grass, kind of, you know, if you're grass measuring, you'd be talking kind of 700 to 1,000 kilos of dry matter per hectare, okay? Like I'd be targeting, you know, I'd be targeting what you call it, these for grazing, and also, you know, to put out about your half bag urea on them, okay? And then the paddocks that have a higher cover as well, look, maybe 23 units of N per acre as well, okay? And like what I say here as well, look, is that in a lot of cases, some of you might have a lot of outdoor open tanks, or you might have lagoons, or you might have a lot of slurry on hand, you know, and if that is the case, you know, you could pick out a portion of this ground and maybe try and get some watery slurry on here as well, okay? But, you know, what I would really encourage you, first of all, to do is to hold 2,500 to 3,000 gallons of good slurry for the silage ground, and then use the rest on, you know, keep the rest in for the graze ground, the more watery stuff. So then say for the second split of fertilizer, say that plan will get us to the 1st of March. And what would we typically be looking at, say, from the 1st of March to the middle of March then, maybe in terms of putting on our second split of fertilizer, okay? So look, for here, what we're looking at is any ground that's got slurry in that period, you know, as we get into March, maybe the middle of March there, about 35 units of nitrogen per acre, okay? So look, this ground will have got its P and K from the slurry. It just needs to be topped up now with nitrogen, okay, in March, okay? This ground here, say that has been grazed, there's a few different things that can be done here with this ground, okay? And it depends on your own situation in terms of trafficability and can you get on with slurry. So if you can get on with slurry, I would get on with, again, 2,500 gallons of slurry. And what I would say with that is that will give about 20 units of nitrogen, but so that will need to be topped up with another kind of 20 units, maybe 2 weeks after the slurry has been spread, okay? Usually the slurry will give you maybe 2 weeks in March, but it does need to be topped up to keep the grass growing, you know, until you kind of get into your second rotation of grazing into April there, like I said, you know. If you can't get slurry to it, what I would say here is look, maybe 18,612, something like maybe 2 bags of 18,612, you know, per acre. That'll give you your 36 units of nitrogen. It'll also give you a bit of P and K as well, where if you haven't got slurry on, because, you know, like that P, particularly in March, is very important, okay? It kind of primes up the system for when you start hitting into the higher growth rates than in April, okay? So if you can't get slurry on, maybe 18,612, and look, for a lot of you, look, you mightn't have a P allowance, and if you don't, look, all I'd say there is, you know, just go on with 35 units of nitrogen, okay? And then say the ground that has the higher covers, this type of ground, we'd be aiming to graze this ground in March. You'll have a lot of cows calved, be more mouths there, you'd be helping to get through it a bit quicker. And maybe once it's grazed, you could follow it with slurry. Again, if you can't get slurry to an 18,612, you don't have a P allowance, with 35 units of nitrogen, okay? Then after that, then this will be kind of more coming in, we'll be coming into the point of the year where we might start following cows with fertilizer. We grazed the final kind of 40% of the farm. We grazed what would have been the lowest covers at the start of the year at this stage, and followed with around 25 units of nitrogen per acre. And as we get into that second rotation, you know, we're kind of back to that kind of units a day rule. So if our rotation length is about 25 days for the second round, if the rotation length is 25 days, or we should match that and put out about 25 units per acre, okay? So that's a rough rule of thumb, okay, and this would be for kind of intensive dairy farms now, okay, where there's a lot of stock on hand, there's a high stocking right there, okay? Look, on wetter, more marginal grounds, or where the stocking rate isn't that high, or maybe it might be closer to, maybe close to 2 cows per hectare on the milking ground, as opposed to maybe 3 or 3.5 on higher stocked farms. A lot of it, it might be a case that you might graze some of this ground first before putting on this early nitrogen, okay? Or what you might do is try and get more slurry out, okay? Across this ground first. You might be a little bit later going out. But on the heavier intensive farms, I would encourage that bit of earlier nitrogen. I think is still, despite the cost, it still is valuable to have spread in terms of growing grass, okay? So look, that's the grazing ground. On silage ground then, look, as a plan for what we're going to do on silage ground, requirement for first cut silage, a crop of silage cut there around the 25th of May will require around 100 units of nitrogen, 16 units of P, and around 100 units of K. And look, as well, it does require sulfur as well. It's something that some people are very good at putting on sulfur, some people aren't. It's something I've kind of promoted a lot with my groups now in the last while. Sulfur is very important in terms of improving the efficiency of how nitrogen works within your fertilizer. Okay, so sulfur is important, and it also is very important as well too for the protein in your silage. I would have seen clients now who would have put on sulfur and seen the crude protein of their silage increase by 1 or 2%. Maybe gone from 12 to 13 or 14% crude protein. So look for that. A typical plan for ground that is getting no slurry, and this is just to highlight to you, the actual cost of doing this, of fertilizing silage ground without slurry. Typically what you might have to do is put on 3 bags per acre of 0730 and say 2 1/4 bags of 38.07, which is a protected urea product. And that will give you 85 units of nitrogen, 21 of P, and 90 of K, and 16 of sulfur, which will kind of cover you for what the requirement is. Maybe a small bit slack on nitrogen, okay, but maybe if we're cutting that little bit earlier, it'll be enough nitrogen to grow that crop. And to do that, well, this year will actually cost in or around €216 an acre based on current fertilizer prices, okay? Look, again, if this is just another option here, where if you're, instead of using the protected urea product, you might use sulfocan, okay? Again, 3.5 bags per acre of sulfocan, 3 bags of 0730. That will be the cost per acre, and that's what you're putting on: 91 units of nitrogen, 21 of P, 90 of K, and 17 of sulfur. So that's just to highlight to you the cost of fully fertilizing a first cut silage crop when you don't put slurry on it, okay? And this is what the silage will require, okay? So if you take silage ground in, that's going to get, say what we call good slurry, okay? Slurry out of a covered tank. If we put on 3,000 gallons per acre of that, it'll give you 33 units of nitrogen, 18 units of P, 87 units of K. And what you need to do there really is that, look, the slurry will have supplied probably enough P and K. And all you need to do then is top that up then with nitrogen and a bit of sulfur, okay? So look, a lot of my clients now the last few years have been using this. It's 38 nitrogen, no P, no K, and it's got 7 units of sulfur. It's a protected urea product again, okay? A bag and 3/4 per acre. That'll, when you add what the bag fertilizer will give you to the slurry, give you 100 units of nitrogen going out, 18 units of P, 87 of K, and 14 of sulfur. And you can see, look, the cost to do that is down to €80 an acre compared to over 200 where you don't put slurry on your silage ground, okay? So that's the protected urea option. This is an option, just say if you don't have the protected urea, if you're going with sulfocan, okay? Instead of the 1 3/4 bags of that, you might put out 2.5 bags to the acre. Look, it'll give you something similar, 98 units nitrogen, 18P, 87K, and 12.5 of sulfur. It costs you a little bit more per acre. The actual protected urea is coming in cheaper per unit of nitrogen than can, okay? So that's another important point as well regarding getting value for money this year and fertilizer wise, okay? Then look, silage ground that's going to get that kind of watery slurry, the slurry out of open tanks. It'll probably need a little bit of something extra besides just nitrogen and sulfur, okay? So this is just an option here, okay? Look, if it's getting 3,000 gallons per acre of watery slurry, give you 20, that slurry give you 24 units of nitrogen, 12 units of P, and about 70 units of K. So look, we're a bit slack on K there, okay? So something like the 29-0-14 plus sulfur, that's another good protected urea product that a lot of my clients will use up here to be actually very thankful to it. So 2.5 bags per acre of that, will give you 73 units of nitrogen, 35 of K, 10 units of sulfur. You add it onto the slurry, it can kind of match the requirement. And if that'll cost you in or around 120 euros an acre, it's going to cost a little bit more. You're putting on a bit of extra K to make up for the fact that the watery slurry won't have as much K in it, okay? And look, that's just an option then with the traditional cut sward in, okay? Maybe putting on 3 bags per acre of that. Give you 72 units of nitrogen, a bit of P coming in there as well, 30 units of K. It'll meet your silage requirement in at the bottom, okay? 122 euros per acre. So look, there's a good few different options and scenarios there. Look, I've gone through a lot of different figures and slides there. But look, I'm hoping that Darren and Tim can make these available to you maybe on the Drinagh website or something like that, or maybe in a newsletter as well. Okay. So that's the silage ground. Look, just to wrap up, my overall messages for you is that fertilizer cost has increased, okay, but fertilizer is still by far the cheapest way of putting feed on your farm, versus meal or purchased silage, okay. The price of fertilizer has gone up, but the relative value of grass has gone up as well because meal prices have increased as well. Look, I'd encourage people who want to make the best use of their slurry to get it tested. It's a once-off job, relatively cheap to do, and it'll help you to adjust your application rate then to suit what your ground needs. If you've got a thick slurry, 2,000 gallons per acre might suffice, whereas if you have a watery slurry, you might need to go to 3,000 gallons per acre, depending on what's in the slurry. Look, again, do not fall into the trap of trying to use too much slurry on your grazing ground to reduce your nitrogen fertilizer bill. You'll only rob too much P and K from the silage ground, okay? So I'd be targeting slurry to the silage ground first, and then to get the best nitrogen from your slurry, spread it in springtime using a dribble bar or a trailing shoe, okay? Look, overall, what I really say to you, look, is just have a plan for your slurry and fertilizer for the springtime, okay? A lot of people would use a farm map and identify the ground that's low in indexes to get the slurry, identify the ground that needs, maybe that bit of P and K. A lot of people have said as well about maybe just spreading no P and K fertilizer this year. Basically taking a P and K holiday this year because the cost of fertilizer is high. But look, I'd really recommend against that, to be honest with you. That happened there about 10 years ago, back in 2008, 2009, when the price of fertilizer was high as well. And like we saw soil samples coming into Teagasc, that the P and K contents in the soil samples coming in the subsequent few years dropped off dramatically, okay? So look, there is scope, where you use your slurry to cut back on P and K, but I wouldn't take a complete holiday from it, okay? It'll just might come back to bite you too strongly then in subsequent years, in maybe 2023 and so on, okay? So look, with that, thank you very much for listening. Look, I wish all of you the very best for 2022.
Okay, William, thanks very much for that. I think just have the first year, we up to now, we would all have seen slurry as nearly being a byproduct around the farm. It was nearly the first year we're all starting to put a monetary value on it now. So maybe that's a good thing, that it makes us more conscious of the way we're using it too from an environmental perspective. So look, ladies and gentlemen, what we propose to do now is we're going to do a few questions and answers with William and Martin. And after that, Jason Hawkins from Carbery will join us to give us a market update. So just a few questions for the lads there. Martin, there's a question in here anyway. What type of pain relief would be advisable for cows after a hard pull?
Okay, there's things called non-steroidals. Okay, so we never use anything like cortisone or anything like that. We really don't want to use that, but we've got non-steroidals which your vet can prescribe for you. Some of them are zero milk withdrawal, some of them aren't. There's the active ingredients, things like meloxicam, and the other version you hear is ketofen. There's a number of generics involved in there. They're quite safe to use. Take a bit of veterinary direction on them. Some with withdrawals, some non. So non-steroidals, that's what we're looking at.
Okay, thanks for that, Martin. William, there's a question here. If silage ground got 2,500 gallons of slurry this week, is that enough for first cut silage?
Yeah, if it's thick slurry now, if it was out of a slatted tank now and little water going into it, I think it should give you enough, close enough to enough P and K for first cut silage. If it's out of an open tank, kind of watery slurry, I still think you're probably going to have to top up with some small bit of at least K anyway. Okay, similar kind of maybe to the second set of examples I showed there. For the watery slurry, I'd use the two of those as a guide there. Okay.
Okay. We'll move on, Martin. Maybe back to you again. Is it too late to act on cows under body condition score now?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Okay, if they're too fat, it's difficult to do anything about it. I think again, you got to be a little careful if you over restrict them coming into calving. You may exacerbate some of those negative energy balance issues. So we would try and feed them a little bit better. Even it sounds strange just before calving. You really got to watch them after calving that their intakes are good and get back to your feed space and so on. There is some preventative measures you can do. Again, have a chat with your vet. There's some products you can use if cows are excessively fat, Menense and boluses and so on. There's also probably would look at the more mature cows then, giving them a calcium bolus after calving as a preventative. Thin cows much more straightforward. Thin cows much more easy to deal with. Again, we can feed that cow on and keep feeding her right up to calving, and she will do just fine. So they're your options. So have a chat with your vet about those fat cows.
Right, and just Martin, and we'll say on the transition, then we'll say the transition from moving on from after calving, post calving, right? How much ration would you actually give a freshly calved cow, or what speed would you introduce ration at? Because some fellas have a habit of going from 0 to 60 like here and running into it.
Sure, yeah, and you can get scoury cows and you can promote DAs and stuff as well because it upsets their intake of forage. So again, if I'm using that little fresh group where I have my withdrawal cows or colostrum cows are there for a couple of days, 2-3 kilos of ration max am I going to start with there. So 1.5 kilos morning and evening, kilo morning and evening is fine. You build their forage intake. Once your forage intake is going up, you can start lifting the ration. Then the rule is 1 kilo per 3 days. Might not be practical, but every couple of days I'll be up on those cows 1 kilo, depending on your parlor system. Those people with batches, 2 to 4 is probably where you're going, and work at that. If you're getting in a bit of grass into the diet, it's probably working with you with that cow type. Higher yielding cows, you need to be a bit slower, a bit careful, particularly lads who are building up to 6 and 7 kilos. You're probably going to do that over a 2-week period, if possible.
Okay. Maybe back to you again, William. There's a question here on the timing between fertilizer or slurry and fertilizer applications. We'll say, I assume it's on maybe grazing ground there, that if you have slurry put out, or maybe it's inside the ground, when could you go with fertilizer after slurry?
Yeah, what you call it, though, like, when slurry goes out, say typically a lot of people will be going with slurry now. And a very rough rule of thumb I'd use is that once slurry this time of the year will probably give you about 4 weeks, So slurry that goes out now, nitrogen in that will kind of give the grass enough growth to keep it going about a month. So typically slurry going out now is going to give you enough growth until probably sometime around the end of February into the 1st of March, so that's what I'd recommend. Like, there isn't as well, like, if you are kind of bagging up for silage ground, then you typically maybe spread your slurry first, and then maybe go with your fertilizer at maybe 10 days to 2 weeks later. It's kind of good to leave a bit of a gap in between the slurry and the fertilizer. There's a bit of bugs there in the soil, and if it gets the slurry and fertilizer, within 2 or 3 days of each other, you can get a little bit more loss of nitrogen from the ground. Okay, so in terms of how long it will give you, that half bag urea or that 2,500 gallons slurry will kind of give you about that 4 weeks now of growth. And if you're bagging up for silage ground or spreading that way, leave about 10 days to 2 weeks between spreading both, like, if you can,
Okay, and just on that, Will just said, just when we're talking on fertilizer, the weather is very suitable out there right now, or would seem to be for ground conditions anyway. And I know a lot of farmers are debating with the idea, like, is it a good idea to go with urea right now, or should we wait for another week or two to get, because of obviously the expense of urea and on all fertilizers, should we be holding back till we get more into the growing season, or what would you recommend?
Back a few years ago, we probably would have been talking about blanket spreading the farm this time of the year, having the fertilizer out before the cows calve, the job done. And I know, and I appreciate that it is practical to do that, but at the cost of it this year now, and going forward as well, there's going to be the other environmental stuff coming down the lines at us. You know what I mean? That we do have to be conscious of that as well, So, like, what I really would recommend, guys, is that soil temperatures are up now at the moment, around 6-7 degrees. So I wouldn't have much problems with people going out, in a week's time now, with fertilizer, like, on that ground, that you'll get a good response. Everyone knows that early ground, the drier ground, the south-facing ground, the ground that's been recently reseeded, in general, you will get a good response from that. Well, I think we have to hold off on that later type ground. As well, like, on the law of averages, like you say, soil temperatures are good now, but look, they can drop as well, though. You do want soil temperatures above 5 or 6 degrees, and looking to stay above 5 to 6 degrees, for a coming week, like I say, after spreading. And it actually is, that is the case now this past week. But and there probably will be a response putting out your fertilizer now. But the only thing I'll say to people on that is, like, on the higher stocked farms, that may well justify now, but for anyone who's slightly lower stocked, I would hold off, because in general, look, as the longer you do leave it go into February, and say even getting to the second half of February, in general, you are getting better responses then, like I said. I know there's practical issues in terms of calving cows and having a job done, and maybe weather turning and things like that. But on the law of averages, as you get into the second half of February, you generally will get a better response. And they would have seen that, in a lot of the fertilizer trials that they would have done. They put out fertilizer at the end of January, and they generally do find the response picking up as you get up into the second half of February.
Okay, look, I'm conscious of time here now tonight, but Martin, just another one for you. Is it a good practice to test your silage for mineral analysis?
Yeah, please do. I mean, as well as your energy and your dry matter and your protein and so on, get a mineral analysis done. It's very useful information. And again, we're looking at, I was interested in William's presentation on where that potash is going and some luxuriant supply at certain times if we're using a lot of slurry. So I'm conscious of that we got to know with our dry cows, are we giving them a lot of potash in that silage? So it's the big ones, the potash and the phosphorus and magnesium. They're the ones I really want to have a look at.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe linked to that question, William, like, you know, when do we start overdoing that potash, you know, in silage ground? Because it seems apparently it's a problem that I assumed is just putting out too much slurry on silage ground is creating that potash problem in the silage, then, you know, the pit silage. So like, what's the maximum that we should be putting out in silage ground? Like, you know,
a lot of it, Donald, kind of actually comes down to maybe when we spread that slurry as well. Like generally, like a lot of people now will be spreading slurry now these couple of weeks now with good weather conditions. And like, you know, you're a long way away from cutting, so there's enough time now for the grass to slowly take up that P and K from the slurry. You know, where you can, the main issues you get with that luxury uptake of K in the slurry is, you know, say maybe we graze the silage ground there in the middle of March, and then we put slurry on it on, say, you know, coming up towards the end of March, and go up with a heavy application of slurry, and actually might even follow with a bit of bag fertilized with K on top of it, like, you know. So
okay.
like, you know, to be honest, when you do spread slurry earlier, it's giving it longer to uptake. And so what that thing I would watch, if you are putting on slurry at the point of closing up the silage, I'd be very slow to put on extra K on top of that slurry then at that point. Whereas slurry that's gone on now and it's watery, I think it's okay then to put on K a little bit later then as you're putting fertilizer on the silage.
Yeah. And maybe I'll tell you, I know I'm aware that Jason's waiting for us, right? And I know we're probably running a small bit over time, but just and you can just answer briefly, William, maybe highest covers that you can use less application trailing shoes or dribble bar on. You know, I know that there's a lot of them around now, and fellas are, you know, so what would you recommend not going up over what, you know, cover of grass like?
Yeah, about a cover of 1,000. That's what I've seen myself, and what people, I would ask that question in my own discussion groups of people who have used them for the last number of years. Cover of 1,000. Anything generally underneath that, the people are getting on fine with them and are happy with graze out after.
Oh, okay. Right then, lads. Look, I tell you, I'm conscious of time, and I know Jason is waiting in the background for us. So listen, lads, thanks very much. You can stay on with us, and look, we'll move on to Jason. Look, Jason Hawkins, as our final presentation of the evening is from Jason Hawkins, who is the CEO of Carbery. Look, Jason has been a regular at this event in the last few years, and we thank him for taking the time to join us again this year. So Jason will give us a short presentation on the dairy market outlook for the year ahead. So are you with us, Jason?
I am, Chairman. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
No. Great, let me pull this up. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for the invite to be back, and that was a very interesting discussion before this. So look, I'm just going to give a brief update on the markets and where we are. Look, first of all, I guess, look, just some pictures here on the cheese diversification project and where we are, and obviously, look, everything is fully commissioned at this point in time and up and running. And look, I know the board are eager to maybe try to host an open day later in the year. So look, with all things COVID, hopefully restrictions lifting and so on, we'll certainly look at maybe doing that later in the year as we did a few years ago, because look, we'd obviously love to show our shareholders and families and so on around the new facility. But everything right now is working very well. So obviously, look, some of the products here, and look, maybe some on the left there that you can go in and actually pick up those products off the shelf and so on, and then further afield in terms of Asia and so on as well. So look, I guess the good news there is we certainly we were enthusiastic about getting into mozzarella and the opportunity, and that certainly is borne out as we've developed the markets, which is great to see. So I'm just going to look at a few slides here on where we are with the markets and just on the products in particular, and what's driving them, and maybe what are kind of the outlook in terms of pluses and minuses or things to think about. Mozzarella, first of all, obviously, look, food service mozzarella, ends up on a lot of pizzas, ends up in a lot of food service. So, very much driven by tourism, by travel, and so on as well. So COVID and people eating out and so on, obviously, did have a major impact on the mozzarella market over the last 2 years. Ups and downs, obviously, with some openings and false starts, but generally speaking, pretty muted. But the gap is closing now, where mozzarella was behind other cheeses. That now is closing. There is increased demand, and stocks are tight because the price has been pretty muted for the last couple of years. A lot of milk hasn't got into mozzarella, and a lot of people didn't build stock. So as soon as things are starting to pick up, we're certainly seeing that, and we are seeing the prices improve here pretty well over the last month or 6 weeks or so. And the outlook, look, that recovery in tourism and outdoor eating post-COVID will continue to have an impact. So if the world should open up again, we certainly would expect a big uptick in demand. And again, stocks aren't even being really built at the moment, so there is a shortage out there. The EU milk supply, again, we don't expect that, if we think of what it looks like, and this will be recurring over obviously a bunch of products. But obviously the outlook for the year is pretty muted. And right now, notwithstanding mozzarella has improved in pricing, we all know that skim and butter has taken off. So, people aren't putting a lot of milk into Moz or even cheddar right now. So we would expect that, again, there's not going to be a lot of stock built in the near term. So again, any uptick in demand should see a fairly good recovery, an ongoing recovery in pricing there. And then look, firm cheddar pricing there, not directly linked, but when cheddar is good, then Moz tends to be good. And then the watch-outs look like anything else, the global economy and the impact of COVID recovery. But inflation, again, it's very food service restaurants. So if inflation is going up and people are seeing less in their bank accounts at the end of the week, then they're going to be less inclined to maybe go out and have that pizza or eat out and so on as well. So you've got to watch that as well in terms of the inflationary environment. So next, if we think about cheddar for a moment, sorry, just a tiny lag on my slides here. Cheddar, again, weaker milk flows into cheddar as well, like other cheeses. So, we're not seeing a lot of product, excess product or inventories being built. Retail demand has been strong. So through COVID, we certainly have seen that, and we haven't seen that fall off. And some of the numbers you'll see will say that, cheddar demand is, should end up actually being, give or take 5% stronger than it was pre-COVID. So that's a good thing in terms of the long-term outlook for cheddar demand. Again, some of the logistical challenges all around the world have really encouraged buyers where they are taking position to hold a little bit of extra stock. What I would say, in the current environment, the UK cheddar pricing is competitive. So we have seen more cheddar staying within the UK, really as a consequence of, I guess, of Brexit and some of the border issues. So, if we look at cheddar pricing outside of the UK is actually slightly better than inside the UK. And look, we'll see whether that's a kind of a temporary thing. I mean, when we speak to our partners and or new in the market, they certainly think that the UK market will continue to deliver into the long term. And then food service, again, like mozzarella, is improving, and then the outlook is similar. Good retail demand, that's staying in place, tight stocks and modest milk supply, and again, because of skim butter returns at the moment, where people have optionality, where they've got flexibility, they'll go into skim and butter first. The watch out here, though, is certainly, in our world of cheddar, where we do a lot of aged cheddar and premium cheddar, natural cheddar, you do worry about, obviously, that at the higher prices, people will just choose to maybe take either, processed cheese and cheaper cheeses and younger cheeses as opposed to mature. And then the UK self-sufficiency piece I spoke to, and also, look, as we know, the UK did a trade deal with New Zealand. So they're the kinds of things that we watch out for into the future. Butter, look, again, the key drivers here are, I guess, look, what's going on in terms of milk supply in France, Germany, and the UK over the last 6 months in particular, where it's been weak. And then obviously they're a key driver in the cream and butter markets. And because of that, a lot of buyers were also short for Christmas because prices had been creeping up and they didn't want to get caught. But around the Christmas time, they had to buy, so they ended up driving prices even higher. And even cream exports continue to be strong out of the EU. And so overall, again, even though retail sales have maybe come back a little bit, but they're stronger versus pre-pandemic, similar to cheddar. So a very buoyant market there, really driven by just it's the supply element is really hurting. And so look, it does. The outlook is pretty positive right now in terms of butter, and the spot market is very high. And then the expectation is that certainly Q1 will remain high. And the question is, will Q2 ease and so on? But certainly even the first half looks fairly firm right now. And again, that European outlook, and if France, Germany, and UK continue to be weak, then that certainly will have an impact. The watchouts are, though, we've seen what butter and skim have done in a tight market, and it tends to respond quickly as well on the downside. So if consumers, if demand is down, or all of a sudden there is supply, butter just fluctuates very quickly. So it's as much as it's up, it could come down pretty quickly if the market changes. And again, that higher price piece of, do consumers start buying cheaper alternatives and spreads and what have you over time as well. So that's really butter. And then skim and protein, really, I suppose the different story here, which is really driven by China and China's imports, certainly over the last 12 months, significantly higher, and stocks have been tight to begin with. We can all remember, I guess, a number of years ago, not too far back, where we had the EU inventory and so on that was bleeding into the market and so on, but all of that's well gone by now, and then China demand has picked up. China demand could be a bit of inventory build, but also, through COVID, the Chinese government have a policy of encouraging more dairy consumption, kind of on the back of better immunity, better health, and so on as well. So again, we'll see what happens there. It's one of the watchouts, I guess, in terms of China in the future. But certainly, again, the logistical challenges and particularly around skim, traveling around the world, people getting containers and so on, buyers where they can get it have been buying it and building stock and so on. And then look more broadly, protein, look, casein has been very, very strong as well over the last number of I guess the last 18 months, 24 months really. Outlook, again, it looks very solid. You look at the futures, they're all very strong on skim as well. Energy costs, could have an impact on supply as people think about energy costs have soared and the gas cost of drying and so on. May impact supply, but right now I think the returns are there across skim and butter to suggest that that will negate any energy costs in that regard. And then strong oil prices again in Middle East, Africa, and so on, where when oil is high, then obviously you get more buying in those regions in particular. And then look, the watchouts really are that China piece of, again, historically we've seen in crashes in dairy markets, where China have been a big reason why they go up. When they suddenly just decide, listen, we're not going to buy anything for 6 months, and you'll see that correction pretty quickly. And just general economic conditions, I guess, in COVID or inflation in emerging markets, again, will have an impact certainly on skim and protein. So look, some of the things to watch out in 2022. Look, the food inflation demand burn off, as I said earlier, people, less disposable income, they're going to cut back maybe on, and certainly look, premium cheddar, etc., eating out and what have you. Look, the input cost, look, you're all very, very familiar with on this. And I guess that certainly is, and even if you looked at the US numbers in December where they're back zero, they're pretty flat, but back 0.1%. You can see that it's, even despite some of the high prices out there, when you look at the input costs right now, it's still not necessarily super attractive in every market to be just driving on with producing milk. So that's something to watch out. Supply chain, again, that will have an impact, whether it gets tighter or it eases up in terms of maybe people holding inventories and so on. Gas and energy, I spoke to that a little bit. I mean, we would see here the impact on energy costs, and it's really something we're watching out. And look, we're all reading the newspapers and watching the news around Ukraine and so on right now. And it's been extraordinarily volatile, I guess, more volatile than we've ever seen natural gas in particular. Food service demand, again, related to kind of the COVID recovery, and inflation. And the global milk production, I mean, right now it's certainly looking very flat for the year, and that demand will outstrip supply. And, you know, I think, look, a lot of people might have seen even New Zealand out today saying that their most recent numbers were down in December by 5%. They were forecasting to be down for the season, and you would expect that that could even be weaker again. And then you consider things like, you know, the Dutch government talking about, you know, retirement schemes and so on as well. So look, the global dairy supply, I guess, picture right now, you would say is pretty bleak, which the positive being it should continue to support prices. And then finally, the last one is the Chinese import demand and what inventories. So in conclusion, again, global growth forecast at 0.8%. Don't, based on everything we're hearing and seeing right now, you wouldn't expect it to be ahead of that. That might even be challenged in some ways, I guess, depending on what happens here, particularly in Europe in the spring. Dairy demand though looks good at, you know, plus 1.5. Even I've seen 2.5 as well. I mean, look, it's a bit of a kind of a stab, and certainly again that in an inflationary environment, it's hard to make that call. But look, I think you'd safely say that demand should be ahead of supply, and pricing right across all the products right now is quite firm. So really, that's a quick run through the markets and the products right now, Chairman.
Thanks very much for that, Jason. So I suppose all is pretty positive looking in that if supply or if demand, I would say, exceeds the supply, all should look quite positive for the year ahead anyway. Just a couple of brief things, and I know you touched on it there, Jason. I suppose us as farmers are very conscious of you know, energy prices and the way they've gone and the way it's impacted fertilizer, and we're worried about contractor charges, etc. And like, what impact have the energy prices had on Carbery over the past number of months now?
Yeah, I mean, you know, last year, and certainly we look at our kind of what was a forecast this year, and look, it's a moving target in terms of markets being very volatile. But give or take, we would say, you know, in the last 12 months, it equates to roughly 2 cents a litre of a difference, an increase in energy costs in terms of our natural gas usage cost here in the facility of 2 cents a litre. And that's something that we hear pretty kind of standard around the industry right now. It was, you know, people were saying 1 not so long ago, it was 1.5, and it certainly is 2 right now. And again, look, we obviously monitor that on a pretty much a daily, weekly basis right now, and you could see, you know, it goes up and down by us, and quite frankly, at the moment, it could be 3, it could be 1.5. So it's very, very volatile, and certainly is something that we manage here. We do have obviously hedging strategies, and we manage all of that. But look, it's an incredibly volatile, and has been an incredibly volatile and high market for the last number of months.
Okay, thanks for that, Jason. And just one other question: how much maws would Carbery have made, we'll say, in the past year? We'll say.
Yeah, so in 2021 we made 8,500 tons of mozzarella. We sold about 6,500 tons, and we just kept 2 where we committed to customers that we would send them to them in kind of January, February, and so on as well. And we'd expect that was 2021, and 2022 we'd expect to probably be closer to maybe 10,000 tons. With a bit of, you know, maybe a little bit more, probably not less, but give or take, we'll do 10,000 tons this year.
Okay, look, thanks very much for that, Jason. Look, I'm conscious of time, lads. I'd say we probably ran a little bit over time, but look, anyway, that's the way the show went. So look, at this stage, I just want to thank Martin, William, and Jason for giving us of their time and their knowledge here tonight, on their expertise, knowledge, and on the various areas they dealt with here tonight. Also, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Tim and Darren here in the Drinagh office, who put a lot of background work into organising this event tonight. And finally, look, I want to thank you, the audience, for your participation and attendance. And I appreciate that we're heading into a very busy time of the year, and I know people are probably tired of hearing this, but it can become a stressful time, look, calving time, and there's pressure time, and look, the last thing we want to see happening in the area anyway is anybody having a farm accident. You know, when people get tired, these things are inclined to happen a little bit more often. Also, some people can come under a bit of pressure and feel a bit stressed out at times. And look, I suppose if things aren't going your way, maybe the lads here in the office are always quite willing to help, to give a helping hand in any way they can. So I'd say feel free to contact Tim or Darren or any of the lads here at any stage. And so look, with that, I just want to wish you a good calving season and wish you all the best for the year. So with that, we shall close the meeting. So good night and thank you.